Let's do some calculations with time. Not so much telling time, you probably learned that already, but figuring out elapsed time. How much time has gone by? Sometimes it's fairly straightforward. Let's suppose I'm taking a test and I start my test at 10:08 and I finish it at 10:41. Since that's all within that 10 o'clock hour, all I need to do is worry about the minutes that have gone by, so I can simply subtract. 41 minus 8 is a difference of 33 minutes. So that wasn't so bad. It gets slightly more complicated if we don't keep it within the span of that 1 hour. Let's go for a drive, a bit of a long drive. We'll start at 9:30 in the morning, and we'll finish arriving at our destination at 12:15. Now that's a little more complicated because we need to subtract hours and minutes. So if we set that up as a subtraction problem, going from 12:15 minus 9:30, we find that we can't really subtract 15 minus 30 here, so we need to borrow. Borrowing time is an interesting trick because normally we're used to borrowing in a base 10 system. So if I borrow from the 12 hours here and make that 11 hours, I would just go over here and make this into 11 instead of 1, right? But that's not how it works when we're counting time because there aren't 10 minutes or 100 minutes in an hour. There are 60 minutes in an hour. So if I've borrowed 1 hour here, what I've actually borrowed is 60 minutes. And if I take that 60 minutes and I put it with this 15 minutes that I already have, that means I have 75 minutes here now, because I had to add 60 when I borrowed. So now I'm taking 75 minutes minus 30 minutes. I can do that. That's 45 minutes. And over here I'm taking 11 hours minus 9 hours, that's 2. So it took me 2 hours and 45 minutes to make that drive. That's a little bit tricky. You might find that it's actually easier for you to simply count your elapsed time from starting to ending, because you can kind of mental math that without having to worry about the borrowing. Really, both ways work. You can do it whichever way is easier for you. Some people like to think of it in chunks of time. So from 9:30 to 10:30 is 1 hour. And then from 10:30 to 11:30 would be another 1 hour. And then from that 11:30 to, let's go to 12 o'clock, would be half an hour. And then from that 12 to 12:15 would be an extra 15 minutes, right? Or a quarter of an hour. So I would have 1 hour, 2 hours, 2.5, plus that 15 would make a grand total of 2 hours and 45 minutes. Same answer, just a different way of calculating it. And you'd probably just do that in your head rather than writing out each of those steps. But it works either way. You can do whatever works best for you. There's an extra complication that happens here. If we go AM to PM past that 12 to where we start counting from 1 again, let's take a longer drive. Let's start our drive at 9:30 in the morning, but we're not arriving until 7 p.m. Okay, so we're going from 9:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Now, straight up subtraction isn't going to help us much there because taking 7 minus 9 is going to be a problem. We're going to come up with a negative answer. And we know it didn't take us negative time to arrive at the end of our trip. Then we'd be arriving before we left, and that makes no sense at all. So we've got a couple of options. One option is to simply count forwards like we imagined doing up here. So I could just start at 9:30. And I could count hours, 9:30 to 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, and then an extra half an hour to 7 p.m. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9.5 hours. If I just count it like that, that would work. Or we could break it into pieces, breaking at 12 when we switch from AM to PM. So we could think of it as 9:30 to noon to 12 o'clock, and then noon to 7 p.m., and we could calculate each of those chunks. So this noon to 7 p.m. would be 7 hours, and 9:30 to noon would be 2.5, and we could add 2.5 hours plus 7 hours and end up with 9.5 hours. So we could just break it into pieces. Our final option would be to think of our PM time in 24-hour time. It's sometimes called military time because you tend to hear people in the military using it. In that case, anything that's a PM time, we add 12 to it to convert it into our 24-hour time instead of 12-hour time. So instead of starting over counting at 1, we get to 12 and then we just keep going, 13, 14, 15, and so on, which you can convert by adding 12. So we would take 7 p.m. plus 12, and we would think of that as traveling from 9:30 to 19 o'clock. We usually call it 1900 for some reason instead of 19 o'clock is how they tend to read that. But we can do it that way. If we do that, then our subtraction will work again. Then we can take 1900 hours minus 930, and our subtraction's going to work better for us. We will still have to borrow in 60s though, right? We're going to borrow an hour here because I can't take 0 minus 30. And what I'm borrowing is 1 hour, which is equivalent to 60 minutes. So then I'm taking 60 minus 30 and 18 minus 9, and there's my 9.5 hours again. So any of those methods will work. You try a couple.